Hello, my name is Rusty Ford. Today I'm talking about a very sensitive topic. It's called 10 Things You Can Do to Prevent Teen Suicide. And I know personally that this is a difficult subject because I had a teenager who was suicidal. And I wish I would have known, a lot more back then than I did. And I can't say that I know everything I need to know now, but in our case, it worked out okay. We were blessed that she was able to express in a ways that we could understand that she was thinking of ending her life. And with teenagers or with anybody else, it's not always that clear. And so, you know, since we came to that realization early, and she told us that she was thinking about suicide, we were able to get her the help that she needed. And now she's living a full, happy, and complete life in her mid 30s. But I learned a lot since then, and I'd like to share with you some of the things that we did and some of the other things I wish I would have known about at the time. And so when we start, we're going to start before, talking about suicide prevention with teens before they ever tell you. Because in finding out that they may be suicidal, you have to be proactive. Before I start, this video is centered on preventing teen suicide, but all these things can work for helping prevent any suicide. And all the graphs and images I use in this PowerPoint are free to download. I have links in the video description on YouTube to where you can download these for free. If you find this video helpful, I ask you to like it and to share it with a friend. And if you're interested in suicide prevention, please subscribe to this channel. I put up 1 to 2 videos on suicide prevention every week. And lastly, before we get started, if you have questions, experiences, or ideas, please share them in the comments. The more people that comment, the more people that share their experience, and the more questions that are asked, the better the overall video becomes. Now, before we actually get into the prevention part, I'd like to say something about the need. I have a video that talks, in-depthly about teen suicide and the need to reach out and help prevent it. So I'm not going to go into detail, but I'm going to quickly go over 2019's numbers. In 2019, 18.9% of all high schoolers, 9 through 12, seriously thought about suicide. 15.7% of them thought enough about suicide to have actually made a plan, and 8.9 attempted suicide. So let me put that in a number to make it a little more clear. If your local high school has 1,000 students in it, on average, 90 of those students would have attempted ending their lives, and 189 of them would have been thinking seriously about suicide. So whether you're a parent of a teen or somebody that's a teen, you're working with them, you're a youth minister, you're a school teacher, you're a counselor, the need is out there and the need is great. And it's going to take us paying a little more careful attention to the teens around us so that we can see early and before it gets too serious that they're thinking about suicide or they're fighting depression, and get them the help they need. Because the earlier you can get them started in getting help, the more likelihood they'll overcome their suicidal thoughts, or the more likely they'll overcome their depression and anxiety issues. So number one, the first thing that you got to do is pay attention to the signs of suicide and the life events that can lead to suicide. Because if we're not paying attention, it's easy to miss. None of us want to think that our teenager, our child, our adult, our parent, our best friend, would end their life with suicide. And so, we have to have a natural block against seeing this because our brains don't want to, and we have to pay a little better attention when certain things happen. So, paying attention means listening even when your teen or your friend or family member is not talking. And you can tell this by the things that they say, because they're most likely not going to come up and say, I'm thinking about ending my life. But there are things that they say, things they do, and things that you can observe. You, I have a whole video on um, the signs of suicide, and I can't go into them all here. This would be a long video, but you're welcome to view that video so that you can learn what to look for. When by what they say, what they do, and what they observe. And also, I've got another video that deals about crisis in teens' lives, and there's certain events that can make a teen much more vulnerable to suicide. So we have to pay attention to those. Real briefly, this graphic is included for free, as I mentioned, but these are the signs or the signals that people give off out that they may be thinking of suicide. And this is a suicide prevent crisis checklist that we have. And so if they've had any of these events, then you need to pay a little careful attention, because young people, adults, anybody who have these events in their life can be a trigger to suicidal thoughts. And again, I've got a video specifically on identifying these crisis events. 2, don't let your teen's depression, anxiety, or mental health go unchecked. Studies have shown that 9 in 10 teens who take their own life meet the criteria for a diagnosis of a mental health condition or disorder. Now, they may not have had that diagnosis, but they have all the symptoms that suggest that they might. So if your teen is suffering with depression, don't ignore it. If they've got anxiety issues, don't ignore it. You start getting them help right when you first notice that they're struggling with depression or anxiety type issues. Because as I said before, the sooner that you get involved and start getting them the help, the less likely that this is going to move them to the point of being suicidal. Number 3, never assume threats of suicide as typical teenage melodrama. My picture is blanking my word there. Melodrama. Take any verbal or written statement that suggests that they want to die seriously. This includes statements such as, "Nothing matters. I wonder how many people would come to my funeral. Sometimes I wish I could go to sleep and never wake up. Everyone would be better off without me. You won't have to worry about me much longer." Any statement like that, whether you see it written on something or something they say, take it seriously. Even if it sounds melodramatic, even if they say, "Oh, if you don't give me this, I'll end my life. If I don't get my way, I'll kill myself." Well, sometimes that's drama, but often it's not. And we need to always take it seriously when a teenager or anybody around us shares things that suggest that they may be thinking of ending their life. And when this happens, don't criticize the statements in any way, such as, "You don't really mean that," or "That's a crazy thing to say." Because if they are reaching out, this will just shut them up, and then they'll stop. Talk to them about it in a non-judgmental way, understanding that they very well might just be saying, "I need your love and attention because I'm in tremendous pain and I can't seem to stop it on my own." Understanding that suicide, and is not about death. It's about ending the pain. Most people who are thinking about suicide don't really want to die. There have been many studies of people who have attempted suicide after they have attempted. And we're talking about studies that include tens of thousands of people, and almost all of them in this follow-up said that they really didn't want to die. They were just in so much pain and they couldn't figure out any other way to deal with the pain. And that's one of the reasons I mentioned, paying attention and catching these things early, because the earlier you catch it, the less the overall trauma from the pain they feel is. So, listen to them and because I know when I was suicidal, I didn't want to die. You know, but I just could not handle the pain anymore. And you know, I didn't want to die, and you know, I took the effort to find things to do to change that, but not everybody can. And some people's pain may be much more serious than mine. And understand that emotional pain is invisible. We can't see it, but they are feeling it and they are living it. And so when they suggest something that says, hey, my emotional pain is so deep that I'm thinking about ending my life, we need to pay careful attention and get them the help they need. Number four is to get professional help right away. If they say or do anything that makes you think that they may be suicidal, or that they have severe depression or anxiety or any other symptoms of any other mental health disorder, then we need to get them the help they need. One of the first places you can go is to talk to your pediatrician. You, uh, they can recommend various services. They can recommend a psychiatrist if need be. You, um, but they're paying attention to your children's health. Your school counselor is a great place to go. If they're struggling in school, which is one of the big signs that a teen may be suicidal, or they may be suicidal because they're struggling in school. But the school counselor will also have a list of resources in your community. If your child is struggling at school, they're the number one place to go. A mental health professional, your pastor, your youth pastor. You can find a support group. And I mentioned a support group because there's, you know, uh, in most large communities, there's a support group for people who are thinking about suicide to help them overcome those thoughts. But I mentioned above the crisis events that they go through, and there's support groups for people for teens whose parents are going through divorce. There are support groups for people who've lost a family member. You take almost anything on that list, there's a support group out there. And so if you know there's a big traumatic event in their life, you can get them involved in a support group, especially if that event seems to be holding on to them. And what I mean by that is, everybody, when they lose a family member, go through grief. You know, um, but the severe part of the grief, I mean, the overwhelming part, usually is only weeks to months. So if this deep level of grief continues for a longer period of time, a support group um, can radically change your life. And I don't know that I've ever known anybody that went to a grief support group that wasn't happy that they did. So whatever they're going through, you know, um, and and as you discuss things with them, if they share things that are causing them to be um, you know, really stressed and really anxious, you find look to see if there's a support group to help them in that area. And if they're involved in drugs in any way, then rehab is very appropriate. Yeah, I know that they're going to fight you on this. They don't want to go to rehab. They don't want to admit they have a problem. They don't want to find a support group. They don't want to go to a mental health professional. They don't want you talking to their school counselor. I mean, they're no different than us as adults. We don't want those things, but sometimes we need them. And if your teen is thinking about suicide, then they need it. If they're suffering severe depression and anxiety, they need some outside help. And so getting them the professional help as early as you possibly can not only prevent suicide, but it can also lead them to a full and happy life much sooner than if you wait. Number five, encourage them not to isolate themselves. Isolation is the worst enemy of depression and anxiety. Isolation is very dangerous when we feel sad, we're stressed, overwhelmed, depressed, or anxious. I mean, it's never healthy to be isolated, but when you're struggling with mental health issues, it's even worse. So help them get involved in things they enjoy, such as sports, clubs, drama, religious youth group, uh, or anything that has real personal interaction in it. You, uh, you know, studies have shown that religious groups are a natural barrier to suicide. People deeply involved in their religion uh, are about half as likely to end their life with suicide as those who aren't. That's not to say it never happens in churches or mosque or any other religion, but people who are involved in their religion and their church are much less likely to be suicidal. And that's one of the main focuses, reasons for that is you have a lot of good, healthy social contacts. Six, encourage them to exercise. Exercise can play a major role in lowering depression and anxiety. We've seen that for years. And when you're suicidal, you, I recommend group exercise where you can, because there's the social aspect of that. And this could be a group sport, or this could also be an exercise buddy, somebody that they exercise with. Uh, when I was a teenager, uh, my next door neighbor liked to run, and I was a runner. I ran cross country track at school. I was a long distance runner, and so we ran every day, and we had conversations. And being able to talk to another adult while I exercised, it was one of the things that helped keep me balanced in my life. And then I encourage you to exercise as a family. You know, it's a lot easier to get teens involved in exercise if the whole family does it. So go walking, go hiking, bicycling, tennis, walking the dogs, or even participating in active video games such as dance or sports. I don't really personally think that uh, video games are healthy for teens, especially if your teen is spending 3 or 4 hours a day in video games. That because they're isolated that during that period of time, they may be chatting back and forth, but studies have shown that social media uh, type of contact does not replace the need for physical contact. So getting them out from behind the screen and doing something physical will help them. And I think it especially helps them when they do things together as a family unit, because studies have shown that kids that feel like they live in a healthy family unit are much less likely to be depressed, anxious, or suicidal. Number 7, make sure they feel love based on who they are, not how they perform. I know this is a difficult one to talk about. I look back now, I thought I was a great parent, and I do think I was a pretty good parent. But now that I look back of it, I can look back and see how much you, uh, my expectations of the for them to perform affected our relationship. Uh, Instead of just loving them, you know, sometimes the pressure to get them to do better in school, you know, um, you know, communicates uh, the idea that you care for them based on what they do and how they perform, and not who they are. Especially with teens that are struggling with identity issues, make sure that they know that you love them no matter what. I'm probably preaching to the choir to most people, but it's so easy to fall into these traps and not do it. You don't want them to be failures in life. You don't want them to be homeless in the future. You don't want them to be a drug addict or an alcoholic. You don't want them struggling to meet family needs like you are. So you want them to get a good education. And there's nothing wrong with working with them to do the best they can in school. We just have to always remember that they know that we love them no matter what. They can fail out, they can drop out, no matter what they do, we're going to love them. And when they know that they're loved, they're much less likely to end their life with suicide. Because one of the biggest things that people feel when they're suicidal is the world would be better off without me. So if they feel like a failure, they're most likely to have those feelings. And so when you can help them develop a strong self-image and that they are successful just because of who they are, and that any other type of success is just icing on the cake, it's a bonus. Yeah, but this whole world is a better place for every single human being that lives in it. Number 8, help them cope with tragic events or trauma. As we've talked briefly about you know, the crisis checklist. If they experience anything on that checklist, take extra time with them, help them to learn to adjust. You, because quite a few of these things, if they went through it, you're going through it too. And so as the adult, we need to make special attention to make sure that they're getting help. you know I know it's not easy on this subject because we're struggling too. If they lost a grandparent, you lost a parent. If they lost a sibling, if the teen lost a sibling, you lost a child. You're hurting. So include them in some of the things that you're doing to help yourself. If you lose a child and you're going to a grief support group, include them. You, um, and make sure you get the help that you need, because you can't help them if you're not able to function yourself. But at the same time, make sure they're getting the help that they need to overcome these traumatic events. Number 9 is probably the most difficult on the list. If they are in an emotional crisis, take them to the emergency room. And a mental health crisis is when somebody has reached the point where they plan to end their lives immediately or in the next few days. And if they do something suggests that they're thinking about suicide and you ask them about it, then and they say yes, and I've got the means and I'm going to end my life in the next couple of days, you need help now. And this may include involuntary commitment. And and if they're forced to stay in the hospital 2 weeks, 4 weeks, they very well may be mad at you. But would you rather them mad at you or not around at all? I mean, it's not an easy choice. If it's not immediate, if they're just talking about it, maybe they've got a plan, but they're not planning on doing it immediately. You can get them involved with some of the other resources, the school counselor, get them a mental health professional. All these other things are on the table, but when they're thinking about ending their life right now, you have to get them help right now. And so, the emergency room is one of the things that you can use right now to get them the help they need. You know, uh, uh, I just mentioned, and I should have mentioned earlier, we do have a video on how to ask somebody if they're suicidal in a non-threatening and a non-judgmental way, and in a way that most often has them appreciating the fact that you ask. You, and we also have a video on when and how to call 911. You, and there are proper ways of doing this to ensure that there's no confrontation in there and that the end result is healthy for everybody involved. Number 10, if they're talking about suicide and they've mentioned they've got a plan, remove lethal means. And lethal means are things that a person can use to end their life. You know, uh, you know, uh, Quite often in suicide prevention circles, people hear lethal means and they think remove guns. Well, yes, that's part of it. Guns are the most effective way for somebody to end their life. So if you've got a gun, make sure it's locked up, move it to another person's house until the mental health crisis is over. And even then, if you keep it in the house, I don't own guns now, but I don't have a problem with somebody having a gun for sport or for protecting their house, but you do need to be safe with it. Uh, my dad owned a lot of guns, and those guns were always locked up. But this goes for things like drugs as well. If your teenager suicidal, have all your medications locked where they just can't get to them. If they say that they've got something you know, um, in their room or in their possession that they're going to use, take the access away for that item. I know you can't remove all lethal means. You can't go out and remove a bridge. You can't stop the trains from running. You can't remove every sharp object from your house. But when there's a means that they're thinking about, or something serious like a gun, making sure that these things are not available can help save their lives as well. And the final thoughts is, if they're in therapy and you can participate with them in therapy. I mentioned my daughter was suicidal, and we got her into therapy, and we got into a kind of a combination individual family therapy. We would come in the first 5 to 10 minutes, we would talk together as a family, and then we would go out. Then my wife and I would leave, and then for the next 20 minutes, the therapist would talk with my daughter alone. And it's just, the more involved that children are in their families, and the more they see that their families care, the less likely they are to end their life with suicide. Even if they are thinking about suicide, these are some barriers that you can put up. Help them build a strong self-image. Always be working with their self-image. Never allow them to say things that are negative about themselves. Uh, Help them develop a strong sense of gratitude. Grateful people seldom ever end their lives. And if they're depressed, uh, fighting anxiety, talking about suicide, you can get. There are thousands of uh, gratitude journals out there that you can pick up that can help them develop a sense of gratitude. And the final thing that I'd like to say is, spend lots of time with them. The old saying is, children don't really need a lot of time, they need quality time. It's simply not true. It's one of the worst lies ever brought up by anyone. Children need a lot of quality time. You know, um, 10 minutes of quality time in a week is not enough to help keep a teen or a child emotionally healthy. They need a lot of your time, and they need that time to be quality time. So with that, um, you know, I'll conclude the video. I wish you well. I hope you never have a teenager in your life that's thinking about suicide. But I do believe if you've paid attention to this video, you'll be much more prepared to help them, um, if they or another teen that uh, starts thinking about suicide.